Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of Conservatoire Conversations. Today, we are very kindly joined by Jacob Shaw, all the way from Denmark, on the musical farm. Um, I'd like to take the start of this interview by maybe, Jacob, if you could explain to us about SCS and how it started, maybe what was the purpose of you starting it?
Yeah, so Scandinavian Cello School, I founded in 2016, and I founded it as a foundation to support, promote, and educate young cello players. They were typically aged between 16 and 25. And what we were doing is we were giving additional help to them beyond the conservatoire system. So that could have been a debut concert, it could have been help with the recording, going to competitions. Some of them needed financial support. It was a lot of different things depending on who had applied for help. And all of these projects took place across the world. We had cello camps in Mexico, Poland, Spain, Korea. And then after 2 years, we realized that the one thing we were missing was we were missing a place to call home and a campus. So in 2018, together with my partner, we purchased an old farmhouse, and that farmhouse has since expanded. We bought more land, built more buildings, and that's now known as the Musical Farm. So the Musical Farm is the home of Scandinavian Cello School, and within the Musical Farm, we have a lot of different projects. We have a lot of visiting professors, a lot of visiting artists. We do about 40 community concerts a year across the region, and it's a place, it's a bit of a refuge where all type of musicians and cultural representatives can come to spend some time, normally from 3 days up to maybe a month. And we have around, depending on the year, around 100 to 150 guests that come in and out.
Was there any reason in particular that you decided to have it on farm rather than, I don't know, just something else?
Yeah, so in the first 2 years of doing it, when it was still just for cellists and the Cello Foundation, the places that we were running the projects, if it was master classes or a place to work, chamber music or prepare for recordings and so on, it was always places of natural beauty. And we discovered that to take musicians out of the practice room and out of kind of urban city centers and away from the hustle and bustle, and to be able to really relax and become one with the instrument without other distractions. And the idea of setting it on a farm here in Denmark is that we're close enough to the airport in the city that we can still get in, but here we're away with calm and nobody to disturb, and also not to be disturbed. But I think that a lot of the work that we do in a high pressure industry, like the culture industry and especially the classical music industry, I think that it's good to bring the heartbeat down a little bit and be outside. Another thing I think is quite similar is the preparation for a concert or a competition or audition is quite similar to farming, in a way that we have to start with something, we have to build things up, and we have to really take care of the surroundings and nurture and do quite a lot, but not too much. And that's very similar to music education in general.
Yeah, that's very interesting. It links on to something we wanted to discuss actually. And you talk about the natural beauty of the environment, and we've seen that you're kind of constantly searching for new ways of presenting classical music. We've seen you play to cows and involving nature in the concert, even artwork live, instead of just a standard concert hall. Is this, a conscious effort, and do you think classical music needs reinventing in that way?
I think classical music's not dead, and it's been around for 400 years, and it's not going to become dead. And we definitely don't need gimmicks to promote it. I mean, classical music is still great art, but I think that there's a lot of bullshit and pompousness around classical music, and that it's a place that people should be seen to go to. But in actual fact, if we think back to a lot of classical music and why it was written, it was music of the people, and it was the popular music of the time. So I think that we've a little bit got out of our comfort zone for a lot of people, that they think that music is for a certain type of people or a certain background of people. There's a quote by Benjamin Zander, a conductor, and it's everybody loves classical music, they just haven't discovered it yet. So I really do think that that's true, and I think that it to present it in a no frills version and get that really down to earth so that people are comfortable with the way that it's being performed, but it's still pure classical music. I think that that works. I know that a lot of symphony orchestras are kind of blending with pop musicians and stuff like that, and I think that's great as well to attract a different audience, but that's not going to bring people in to see Mahler 5. And I think that we've got to present classical music in a way that it really is down to the basics and people can sit and appreciate it for what it is, which is a great art form with no distractions. The reason why we played with a painter, for example, is because we were doing Schubert's Quintet, which is probably one of the most epic pieces about life and death that's ever been written. And we blended that with the natural area that we are here, which is the UNESCO heritage site of Stevens Cliffs. And that's the place where we can trace 65.5 million years since a meteor hit Earth and wiped out the dinosaurs and started life as we know it now. So the idea of the painter was he was recreating the meteor explosion by using music as a medium for his painting as we play the music. So it wasn't that it was a gimmick to make the music easier, it was that it was another art form. Regarding the cows, that wasn't something for the cows to enjoy the music. It was a practice technique that we use for our students to show them how ridiculous it is to get nervous for playing a piece of music for an audition. That it's exactly the same as if you play it in a smelly cowshed, and if you play it behind a screen for an orchestral audition, you're still playing the same music and you're still playing the same way. We shouldn't be affected mentally by nerves in that way.
Would you say that doing things like that and playing in nature and not always playing in a practice room or playing to a professor is beneficial for students? Is that something we should do to help in our preparations for auditions and competitions and things?
I think that to get every type of your playing as natural as possible and as second nature as possible, so we can concentrate on what the goal is, which is to make great music and to touch people, is the most important thing. I think that, of course, we have to practice our intonation. We have to practice to be as technically perfectionist as possible. But at the end of the day, we can't forget why we're doing it. And I think that the more you play a piece of music, the more you do it. I remember Yo-Yo Ma said that he would never play a piece in Carnegie Hall until he's played it at least 3 or 4 years in concert programs. And that's another way of looking at it. So music, of course, can get a little bit stale if you overplay it, but you can always find new beauty if it's a great piece of music.
Yeah, that is very interesting, actually. And also, I think that links quite closely to well-being. I mean, the preparation to music and to performing well under pressure is always going to link to well-being. And you're quite a great advocate for that in the industry. Do you have any direct advice as to how a student could help deal with pressure and anxiety in leading up to a high pressure scenario such as an audition?
Yeah, I think that we have to not forget the reason why we're playing music and why we started playing music. And that's the main thing behind it. Nerves are natural and they're good. It's adrenaline. It gives excitement to a performance, but we have to learn to control them. It's very easy to say, just don't get stressed. But that's the most important thing to think about. If you're technically on top of your performance, you should be excited to play for people and not worry about what they're thinking of you. And I know that's horrendous to say when you're in an audition situation, but music is still an art form. We're not running 100 meters where the fastest person wins the race. We've all been to competitions or auditions where we've seen people win and we are like, why on earth has that person won? I've just watched a video of a cellist that won YCAT last year now. And for me, I mean, he's really not at all on a beneficial level of what YCAT could help him with, or a technical level. And I know other people that were there in the finals that could, in my mind, play much better. But I can understand why they picked him, because he brings a different type of music to a different type of audience, and maybe that's what they were looking for. So there's always going to be differing opinions. But I mean, the art either touches you or it doesn't.
Yeah, I think something that conservatoire students can struggle with is that comparison with others, and also sometimes we can maybe get things on our career paths um, that others don't get, or the other way around. And I've heard some complaints, not necessarily by people at our conservatoire. We're very fortunate we study in a great place. Um, but there's some issues around the constant um, feedback that we get from teachers, which is sort of what we signed up to do. But some people can complain that they only really feel like they've played well if it's been externally validated by a professor or competition panel or something. And in that way, they lose their own independence and sort of self-awareness of what they think is good in their own playing. I wonder if you've got any advice in how people who study can still be good with the criticism and the feedback, but also still have that ear to play the way that they want to.
I think it's a tight balance because we all know situations and people think that there's God's gift to humanity, and if you say something to them, and they'll say, "Oh, he's just saying that because I'm good." But so we've got to be a little bit realistic about the fact that there there are criticisms that come in, let's say, on a orchestral panel for a good reason. But at the end of the day, it is one person judging another. And if you know that you're playing on that level, you shouldn't really worry about what people think or do. I mean, everybody acts a different way. I was coaching show music a couple of weeks ago, and there was a string quartet that played that I thought had fantastic potential and were really great, and did a coaching with them for an hour. And I know from I really, really loved working with them, and I'm just on the edge of writing to them and saying, "Hey, if you want some lessons from time to time, I'd be happy with it, as long as the chamber music faculty is happy with it." But then I heard from another one of my students that they had talked to them to say that they thought I hated the coaching because I hated coaching them because I all I did was that I just gave them feedback the whole time, and at the end I just said, "Yeah, it sounds better now." Whereas they were waiting for somebody to say, "Oh, it sounds absolutely fabulous." But I wouldn't ever say that if I really think that they're great, because I thought that, yeah, they're really good and they've got good potential, but I'm not going to shout out false narratives. And maybe in hindsight, they're used to being told in coachings that they're fantastic, and they were waiting for that from me. But I thought they were fantastic, but I didn't have to say it in that way. So they went out of the coaching maybe thinking that I thought it was not very good, when in actual fact it was completely the opposite what I thought. And I was very, very happy to coach them. So people when you don't know somebody, especially if you don't get to talk to somebody on a panel and you just read their handwriting in 3 boxes and get rated out of 25, it can be difficult, but you just have to get used to that, and your whole life's going to be there. I think in your generation it's also dangerous because you have automatic feedback from somebody in your everyday life. You post something on social media and you're used to seeing how many likes it gets and things like that. And when I was growing up, it wasn't like that. And you can have one of the greatest talents ever playing in their room, recording it on a phone, and you find it in the depths of YouTube with about 20 views on it, and it can be fantastic. And then you see somebody else who's got millions of views on something, and you rate because they've got millions of views, it must be great. Whereas that's not the reality. So I think it's a generational thing. But I don't think that we should think too much about this judging. And if you're confident in your own abilities, but not overconfident, and you just keep plugging away and doing the same stuff. I've known people go to 25 orchestral auditions, not get through the first round, and then suddenly win a solo cello job in a major German orchestra. So it's just how it is, and we just have to have a hard shell. Unfortunately, that's the reality of it.
Have you got any advice for, say, if that happens, that scenario that you just described of how to push on and carry on going? I know you just released a film which talks about similar sort of things to that, where it's like you don't get what you want, so you have to fight through it in order to keep moving
Yeah.
forward.
I mean, one of the situations in the film is a violinist that I helped coach to win the first concertmaster job at Copenhagen Phil when she was 21, and she didn't pass her trial year. I'm not going to go into why she didn't pass the trial year, but it was nothing to do with playing. It was to do with that she was very young in a section with a lot of older people who had been there 30, 40 years and just didn't want to have somebody playing better and being there. But I don't go too much into that. Anyway, she didn't pass the trial. And she had a complete burnout and depression for a couple of years, and now she's just won the audition as the first ever female concertmaster for Berlin Opera, Deutsche Oper Berlin. So she's gone from a really, really good Scandinavian orchestra's first concertmaster to one of the best opera orchestras in the world as not only the first concertmaster, but the first ever female hired into that role. And now she's living life and back in Germany, having a great time in Berlin, doing a lot of other things. She's singing and she's dancing as well. And so life goes up and down, and everything happens, I think, for some kind of reason. So you have to get used to not always be on the top. I mean, there's always going to be a fall. Otherwise, everything on the top just becomes a normality. There's going to be ups and downs. It always is like that in life. So it's easy for me to say it now, having had so many downs and ups in my life, but it seems like everything is make or break at your age. And we should chase it like it is, but if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, it's not the biggest thing in the world. You know, so many students that I've been to competitions with and they've gone out, but it's not about them going out. It's about the competition which they do win something, you know? And then if they win something, we make that the biggest thing in the world. So it's just a question of attitude, I think. But it's difficult, of course, because at the end of the day, you've got to graduate from conservatory and you've got to pay your rent. That's it. You've got to survive. And that's the difficult step.
Yeah, I'm slightly worried about that actually, but we'll see how that goes. Yeah, so it's quite interesting. I mean, you're speaking about coaching, but that's a violinist you're speaking about. So in what way did you, obviously you're a cello teacher, so in what way did you coach the violinist to kind of lead her on a path to getting the trial of Copenhagen and the continuous job with Berlin?
I mean, she's a fantastic violin player, so I'm not teaching her how to play the fiddle. But it was more of coaching the confidence to have her come out. And I think some of the best lessons that I had were not from cello players. I think if you're coaching an instrument that's not your own instrument, you're not so obsessed with some technical details that could irritate you. So certainly to listen to her play excerpts and to get her confidence out and to come into the right part. And then also for me, I was then helping her during her trial year, going to watch rehearsals, seeing how she interacted with the section, seeing how she planned her day and stuff like that. So that was more of the work that I was doing. But I mean, we're talking about a violinist who was good enough to behind the screen get not only to be in the last three when the screen goes down, but to actually win the job. So obviously she's on the playing level, which doesn't need my help, but it's often not the technical thing. And I can tell you that the week that she went for the audition in Copenhagen Phil, she had just not got in to bachelor's in UDK in Berlin, to Antje Weiter's class. She hadn't got in. So she went from Berlin up here, and then 2 weeks later had the finals. So there you go again.
Yeah, that's crazy. So just this is still sort of on the topic of coaching / teaching, but what actually drew you to teaching? I mean, we know a bit about your background, but what really do you find the most appealing about teaching? You've got a big class in RNCM now, so just tell us a bit about that.
I mean, I've always been interested in helping others improve their music making. I've always loved teaching. My two parents are pedagogues. I mean, my mum was a music teacher for pre-primary school. My dad was a viola player, but taught fiddle at home from as much as long as I can remember. So I'm always been used to that. I just found it very interesting. And then I was teaching always from a young age. I mean, I was the assistant of my professor in Germany for many things. I set up a lot of workshops and masterclasses, and I just enjoyed it. And then I saw when I was touring, and I used to play, in a season between about 70 to 80 concerts a year, all over the world. And I got a little bit burnt out, more than a little bit burnt out from doing those concerts. But the things that I saw again and again and again was if I was giving some coaching to some people when I was in the city or doing a masterclass or even doing an outreach at a music school, I could see young talents that didn't have the chances that they necessarily should, just because they weren't from the right family or because they didn't have the money or because nobody had really taken notice of them, or it always happens that somebody gets a chance and somebody doesn't. That's just life. So I wanted to create something that would help those people that were a little bit lost. And we're talking 10 years ago here with the beginning of the foundation. So the music world was very different. It's pre-corona. I don't want to say pre-social media, but it was quite pre-social media being so huge, and I think that there were certain oddities in people that stop people helping them, and I think that those people are the most interesting people. So then fast forward to then Corona time, when I was doing more and more here in the farm and more coaching. I had a job in Barcelona as a professor, that I left because I didn't see eye to eye with the system in that conservatory. I didn't think that they were doing enough to support the students. And they promised me some things which they didn't do, like they were changing the diploma systems and everything. They didn't stick by their word. So I left. Then I was a guest professor for a year in Germany, in Münster. And in Münster, I had the same thing with the school. I didn't think it was a very interesting atmosphere for the students. So when the job came up at Royal Northern, this was when I'd been sick and recovered. I really didn't want to travel and go back into touring so much. I just wanted to play the concerts I wanted to do. And I I grew up knowing about RNCM as the big cello mecca. In the 90s and 2000s, it was the mecca, and it was the place where all cellists studied. They had the big festival back in the way back in the day. They had Raphael Sommer was head of strings and big cello teacher, and then you went through Karin Georgen, Ralph Kirschbaum, all of the ones going up. So there were a lot of people studying there and winning competitions, and then we get on to the more modern rung of Hannah Roberts, and a lot of my friends studied with her back in the day in the 2000s. So when I saw the job, of course, it was interesting for me to see what was going. And then when I came to visit the place, it was one of the first times in my life that I visited a university that actually practices what they preach. And I know as students you can have little gripes with what's going on, but for me, it's one of the most exciting and open educational places in the world. And since I've been there, I've got offers to go and take jobs elsewhere. And for me, it's just not interesting because of the atmosphere and the opportunities that are accessible at Royal Northern that are not other places. So that's why.
Yeah, so well, thanks. That's very interesting. We've covered quite a few very nice topics there. I think we're just going to finish off with our final three questions that we've asked on the previous interview as well, and the ones to come. So just first of all, what's the best either the best lesson you had, or what's the best piece of advice that you've received during your career so far?
I mean, if you're talking lessons with teachers, there's been some fantastic teachers that I've had. I really think that we always have three main teachers in our lives. We have the one that starts us playing, then we have one that's the kind of major influence that teaches us how to really play, and then we have one that kind of tidies up everything, is the artistic influence. And that was the same with me. I had the teacher from the age of 4.5, 5 until 10, and then I had the teacher from 10 to 19, and then I had my teacher from 19 onwards. And in between of those, of course, I had some amazing masterclasses. I mean, studying with Starker in the States, watching him teach, and even just having a few bits of advice that was unbelievable. I mean, having masterclass with Rostropovich when I was still at the Menuhin School, it's when you're sitting in front of these kind of giants and legends, it's quite crazy. If you're having a coaching with Rostropovich and he says one thing, I think you just keep it and you do that for the rest of your life. So that's, of course, there's things like that, but then it's also, for me, it's concerts that I've been to that have touched me, that have changed everything. I mean, I also non-classical. In terms of classical concerts, I remember watching the semi-final of the Mozart competition when I was a student in Augsburg, Mozart violin competition, and Andrei Belov playing Grieg Sonata, and he didn't pass. And it was one of the most incredible things I've ever seen, ever, live, and it will remain. Then there was a concert with Sandy Bailey when I was 14, where he played in a tiny little chapel in the north of France. And he came out and he played Britain First Suite, and then he moved the other way of the cross of the church, of the chapel, and then played Bach First Suite, and then he came out and he played Bach Third Suite, and then he played Britain Third Suite. And for me, that concert was one of the great things. Then non-classical, watching Robbie Williams, that was incredible, in the middle of a field in the countryside in Denmark, with mud up to my knees, having waited 8 hours in the pouring rain. And he came out and he was one of the most humble, funny, incredibly talented, sang everything from a cappella jazz ensemble with three other guys, to rock, to pop, to folk songs, and just kept the audience going. It was one of the greatest performances I've ever seen in my life. So there are in every different work of life, and I think that all those things come in. I mean, also playing and watching folk music for Bach, for the bowing. So I think there's places we can learn, but there are a few things that stick in the mind.
Just quickly, because obviously we're pushed for time on this Zoom interview. How do you think that the industry has changed since maybe when you were our age studying, and how can young musicians today adapt to that?
Yeah, that's the eternal question, and I don't know the answer, and that's why I'm running this place. It's changed like crazy. I was lucky because I was slightly ahead of the crowd in terms of using the internet. I used YouTube and I used email lists and everything when people were still printing out things and posting them to promoters. I was really lucky that I had the gift of the gab at the time and could talk myself into playing concerts. I think it's very difficult now, very, very difficult. So I don't know what advice there is, but I think that we have to move in the times, and the presentation, the way you present yourself and the way that you could meet anybody anywhere, and you should always talk to them. And have the little things like the elevator pitch, like know what you want. You're still a product yourself, right? It's a horrible way of saying that you are. So you know what you're selling. So if you meet somebody in the elevator and you have 20 seconds to say who you are, what you're doing, and leave a loop in case that person's, got a strad behind the sofa from their grandma, or their sister-in-law runs the biggest music festival in the world. You never know. You never know. So always talk to people.
And then our final question, we are going to create a playlist with everybody we interview and their recommended personal favorite recording. It could be of any famous artist from back in the day, or current one. And maybe why you'd pick that.
Excluding my own recordings, of course.
Yes, yes, excluding those, yes.
I mean, I have quite an eclectic playlist. Everything from Zen drone music through to
Yeah, we don't want Mongolian throat singing. We want a classical piece, please.
But what do you call classical? Because do you call indie classical like Ian Audi or Max Richter or Nico Muli, or
If you want, if you'd like, then that would be fine.
You could do a pop song, I guess.
You could
Maybe
do a
we
pop
won't be
song.
that strict with it.
Robbie
it's
Williams?
there's a piece which I can show you, which Eva's playing right now, from Andrea Cataburius. And she's my age actually, and she started composing as well. And I think it's at the moment one of my favorite pieces. And it's really incredible one. I can send you that. Then what else? I mean, the world is huge. I have no idea which recommendations to give you. My Spotify playlist is absolutely jumping with different things. I've got a lot into the music of Ray right now.
Yeah,
That's
my
really
brother
some.
really likes her. My brother is a massive
Yeah, but I'm absolutely crazy about it at the moment. And the way that she's doing mixing a lot of elements, also string playing and things. Of course, my girlfriend's playing so much pop music, so I'm seeing a lot of like up and coming artists, and I think the tendency is to go towards people like Ray right now, and those are the ones, thankfully, which are getting successful now, not just produced music. Yeah,
Okay, well, thank you for that. So we've got Ray, and send us the link to the cello piece as well. So
yeah,
that
I will.
will wrap up our Conservatoire Conversations episode 2. Thanks very much, Jacob. The discussion was very interesting. We'll see the viewers next time. Thank you.